So, Jeff, one of the things we were talking about on the podcast and really drilling down and started getting into more was around recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of look at it as a pipeline, all the way from writing the right job description, finding the right candidates to start that process, and then it's all the way through to making sure that there's a fit, and then bringing them on board and getting them getting the most out of them. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how you think about that pipeline, the concept of recruiting, and all the way from how do you find them in the first place to how do you bring them in and make them part of the family, as it were?
Yeah, I think I don't think of it as a pipeline, but I think about it as, if you imagine your imaginary funnel of candidates, you have to do as much as possible to make the top of that funnel as broad as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We are only in a skills shortage where we think about skills as a very tight-knit set of things wrapped around an unrealistic expectation of experience, right? So when we start to think about how we broaden that top of that funnel and how we make the top of that funnel look much more diverse and people from different backgrounds and different perspectives, we have to then come to it from a perspective of, okay, if we're going to take in people that have just a fundamental skill set, how are we going to assess that fundamental skill set, right? How are we going to assess that passion? I think that means then we are investing time in understanding what are the skills we're looking for, how do we assess that set of skills, and one of the basic things you do is you look at a blind assessment of the skills, right? So this can be a homework test, this can be a coding exercise that you do with somebody on the phone, it can be just a basic set of things that then somebody can look at that doesn't understand the background of that candidate. Right, I find that to be a really useful tool to bring in people of different backgrounds and from different career paths or brand new to the security field. The next step then is thinking about, okay, how am I going to slot that person into where I think their passion matches something that we're doing as a team. And we have to be really thoughtful about, where each team, what they do and how passions align to each of those teams. And then you start to think about, okay, how do I build that person up from that base set of skills to, where they're a fully performant engineer on that team. And again, this is where you start thinking about your developmental funds and whatever budget you have here being more about growing that person and educating that person. And you start to bring people in to talk about what are courses I can build internally or that I already have internally if I'm a fairly large organization, or what are third-party courses I can lean on like SANS and other sets of training, and what's the right sort of syllabus or curriculum to get that person to the next level. The other thing I think is really important to keep in mind is that it's sort of a de facto truism that people hire people that look like them.
Yeah.
And the more that you can bring in people and elevate people that are not your typical security people, the more that you now have these front end, these leading hiring managers bringing different people into the organization. And I think that is sort of the catalyst that starts paying for itself.
Yeah, I like how you're talking about that, which typically we've been saying, you hire people who are like you, and I think we went through a period of trying to break people of that.
Yeah.
But kind of what you're approaching is exploit that, is find people kind of like to seed that, and then they're going to help bring in people who look more like them, and so on and so forth, and it kind of just expands from there. So it's an interesting way of thinking about that.
I think embrace human nature. Don't go against it, right? Humans like patterns, and they like to sort of have their way of doing things. Instead, embrace that and exploit it, right? People are going to do what they're going to do. Let's leverage it in the most positive way possible for the organization and for the security outcomes you're driving.
And then how do you think about, so again, going back to the developmental aspects, when you're trying to bring someone new into the organization, that's a very different set of developmental tools that you're going to use new in the organization, where they may not have history or experience, versus someone who's got a ton of experience. how do you think about the developmental concepts of those vastly different sets of backgrounds, knowledge, and how do you help them out?
I think one of the hardest things to do in security is not sort of like, pipe up your logging and alerting pipeline and make sure you have all your telemetry aligned. One of the hardest things to do is look at, a team or an engineer that's being successful and understand, like, what are the skills that led them to be successful? And I think when you invest that time to think about what are the set of skills and what's the background that person comes from, and you can sort of analyze, like, how do I give people more of that? That's where you start to see that pay off, right? And then you can sort of back in from that to how you get them there.
I like that. Makes sense, and it's really you're going to have a nice multiplier.
Yeah,
from
exactly.
doing that.